Okay, so it is 1 o'clock and we are going to start the presentation about the European Accessibility Act. It is shortened to EAA from now on, and we have 7 months and 14 days to the 28th of June. Let's go through the EAA timeline first. So back in June 2019, the European Union published the EAA. So the clock started when the directive was established to outline the legislation. The process allowed 3 years for the adoption of this directive, and that brought us to 2022. When the EAA was transposed into law in the different EU member states. Then a further 3 years to prepare for the implementation of the Act, which comes into force on June the 28th, 2025. So that's when the EU member states must apply and enforce the measures contained with the EAA. Of course, this is a directive, and EU countries actually can give service providers whose facilities were already lawfully in use by 28th of June 2025, a further 5 years until the 28th of June 2030 to actually comply with the new legislation. So we have on the slide as the final point in the timeline, June 2030, the final deadline for compliance with EAA for specific exemptions. In these exemptions, it also fall the self-service terminals, which can operate until the end of their economically useful life, but no longer than 20 years after entering service. Also, there is a delay in compliance for the European Emergency 112 number until June 28, 2027. So first of all, what is the EAA? So the European Accessibility Act, which is often shortened to EAA. It is already the shortened version of the full title of the directive, which is Directive EU 2019/882 of the European Parliament and of the Council of 17 April 2019 on the accessibility requirements for products and services. What is a directive? Just to make this clear, a directive is a legislative act that sets out a goal that EU countries must achieve. However, it is up to the individual countries to devise their own laws on how to reach these goals. What are the aims of the EAA? So the first aim is to harmonize national laws and bring minimum accessibility requirements for a smoother functioning of the EU market. So basically, it aims to harmonize accessibility requirements for certain products and services, so that the EU, the European Union's internal market can operate smoothly, and by eliminating and preventing any free movement barriers. And these barriers may actually exist currently because of different national legislation that is already exists in the various EU countries. So harmonization is really all about trying to create a common set of requirements across EU member states, making it easier for product and service providers to understand what they need to do to meet the accessibility requirements across Europe. But it also makes it much easier for customers to know what to expect. It also has a big aim to benefit both businesses and disabled people. The directive defines people with disabilities, disabled people, in line with the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, which has been ratified by all EU countries. When we talk about the benefits for businesses, let's bring some examples. Unified accessibility rules is a big benefit. The EAA introduces common accessibility standards across the EU, and this will help businesses to streamline their operations and, of course, reduce compliance costs as they do. So easier cross-border training, that's a result from standardized accessibility requirements. So the businesses can actually compete in new markets throughout the EU. And this is reduces the complexity, the existing complexity of navigating different national requirements. And as a result of the harmonization, it will open more opportunities for trade, which again, it will result in another benefit, which is expanded market opportunities. Businesses that invest in accessible products and services will actually gain a competitive advantage. We know that 1 in 4 people aged over 16 in the European Union as of 2022 have a disability. As consumers with disabilities seek accessible options over inaccessible options, companies that meet these needs can increase their customer base. If we move now to benefits for disabled people, it will increase accessibility because the EAA will ensure a wider range of accessible products and services in the market. And individuals with disabilities, disabled people, and also the elderly will find it much easier to use everyday items and access essential services. It will also be a benefit when it comes to competitive pricing. As the market for accessible products and services expands, the competition will very likely drive down prices, and that will make these products and services more affordable. The reduced barriers that the AA aims to bring is it will lower obstacles in key areas such as transport, education, and employment, and this will allow individuals with disabilities to access opportunities more easily. The final benefit that I have, I'm including here, I'm sure there are many more, it is job creation. The demand for accessibility expertise is expected to rise, and this will create, hopefully, new job opportunities in sectors focused on inclusive design and compliance. Who does the EAA apply to? It applies to businesses with at least 10 staff and a turnover above 2 million euros. And it applies to all businesses, minus excluding what I've mentioned before, that trade in the European Union, and companies that are headquartered based outside the EU must comply with the Act if they sell relevant goods or services within the European Union. What does the EAA cover? And this, I think it is on 3 slides, so we will go a little bit more into detail. The Act is focused on products and services, as well as websites and mobile applications deemed most important to people with disabilities or disabled people. Specific requirements exist for manufacturers, importers, distributors, and service providers. So the legislation requires for manufacturers to actually design and manufacture products according to the directive, to draw up the necessary technical documentation to carry out the conformity procedure and to keep the information updated for, they need to keep it for 5 years. Manufacturers need to provide clear identification on their products and their own contact details. They need also to bring out products with easily to understand instructions and safety information. When it comes to importers, importers must ensure that the product has passed the conformity assessment procedure that has the necessary technical documentation, which needs to be included in instructions in a language that it is easy to understand, and also they need to bear the CE marking. Importers must refuse to place on the market a product they believe that is not meeting the accessibility requirements, and to inform the manufacturer and market surveillance authorities as well. Manufacturers, importers, and distributors have legal obligation to act immediately if they discover that their product is no longer compliant with the legislation. For service providers, they must design and provide services according to the directive. They need to make available to the public written and oral information that it is easy to understand, accessible to people with disabilities, on the service that they offer and how this meets the accessibility requirements. And finally, the service providers need to ensure that procedures are in place to continue conforming with the accessibility requirements and take into account any changes, in future changes. So slide number 2 of the what does the EAA cover lists the products that are that fall under the EAA. We have computers and operating systems, payment terminals, and certain self-service terminals, such as ATMs, ticketing and check-in machines, interactive self-service information terminals, smartphones and other equipment for accessing telecommunication services, TV equipment involving digital television services, and e-readers. Specific accessibility requirements apply to all products and services covered by the legislation, provided that these are actually not altering their basic nature or impose a disproportionate burden on operators. When it comes to products, these must be designed and produced to maximize their use by disabled people, and also to comply with detailed rules on information and instructions, user interface, functionality design, support, services, and packaging. When it comes to services that are covered under the EAA, we have a list of services here: telephony services, services to access audio-visual media services, certain elements of air, bus, rail, and water transport services, such as websites, mobile services, electronic tickets, any information given to the public, consumer banking, e-books, e-commerce, and answer to emergency calls to the single European number 112. And specific rules apply to different services. The EAA says that services must make websites and mobile devices easily accessible, provide information about the service, its accessibility features and facilities, and finally support systems such as help desks, call centers, and training to provide information on accessibility. The legislation does not apply to pre-recorded time-based media, such as videos and slides, or any office file formats published before the 28th of June 2025. It does not apply to online maps if essential information is provided in an accessible digital way, to websites and other forms of archives containing content not updated or edited after the 28th of June 2025, and as I have already mentioned, micro enterprises providing services. How is it going to be implemented? So each EU member state must publish their own individual national laws and detailed regulations. Although they are obliged to meet with its goals, they are free to decide how to enforce it. And also, there are some specific requirements for the EU countries, which must ensure that all products and services covered by the legislation comply with its accessibility requirements. In the European Accessibility Act Annex 1, we have the mandatory requirements, and in Annex 2, we have the non-binding examples of how the various accessibility requirements may be met. On request, supply the EU countries, if there is a request, they need to supply the public with information on how companies implement the requirements. And EU countries also must implement and update procedures to check the compliance of services with directive, follow up complaints or reports of non-compliance, and also verify that the company has actually fixed, remediated the failings. And also the EU countries need to provide ways, including legal action, to ensure that the compliance and also include penalties for any breach of the law as well. The European Commission, from its side, establishes a working group of representatives of authorities for market surveillance and services compliance, and of stakeholders, including disability organizations, to promote exchange of information and best practice, to foster cooperation between authorities and stakeholders, and also to provide advice. The European Commission also has to submit by the 28th of June 2030, and every 5 years thereafter, a report to the European Parliament, to the Council, to the European Economic Social Committee and the Committee of the Regions on the application of the legislation. The European Commission also may request the European standardization organizations to draft harmonized standards on accessibility requirements or adopt technical specifications under certain conditions. Currently, there are 3 of them. The European Telecommunications Standards Institute, shortened to ETSI, ETSI, produces globally applicable standards for information and communication technology, very often known as ICT. One of the technical standards is the ETSI EN 301549. The current one is version 3.2.1, harmonized and put into force in 2021. And really lists the accessibility requirements for ICT products and services. It offers a presumption of conformity with the essential requirements of the directive. That means that organizations following the EN 301549 can presume that they produce products and services that conform with the requirements of the directive. Specifically for the web part of the standard, the ETSI standard EN 301549 directly references WCAG 2.1 AA currently. And when the EAA, the new legislation, are going to go into force, that's the version that is going to be used for compliance, for conformity. When will the EAA take place? In fact, we have already mentioned that, but we're finishing this presentation by reminding ourselves that the requirements must be implemented in the products and services being sold in the EU by the end of June 2025. This brings me to the end of the presentation, so I'm going to stop sharing here so that I can see you. And I can take questions, or we can have a discussion. So yes,
Hi.
Nick, have we got a list of questions, perhaps?
There's only one that I've got so far.
Mm-hmm.
Manju he asked, could we look at the previous slide? I think it was slide 9. I think, is that right, Manju?
Yes,
I
that's
had a
correct.
question about. Sorry, she. Yeah, had a question about that slide to do with exceptions and
Okay.
exclusion. Yes, go ahead, Manju.
Thank you, Nick. So, Vayia, the slide number 9, can you please share that? So, just wanted to understand the exclusions. So, I didn't quite catch
Yep.
the.
Okay, I will try and do that. I hope I
Oh,
don't go offline. So give me one moment. I will do my best to share my screen again.
no problem. Thank you.
To share my screen. Okay, and it is slide 9. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So when it says pre-recorded time-based media, okay, such as videos and slides, okay, websites or other forms of, okay, archive containing content. So does that mean, so if there is other archived content on any website, or if it's like due for periodic review, then the future updates or edits, it will be in scope. Okay, got it. Yeah.
Exactly,
I just
yes.
want to
And
make sure I understood that. Yeah,
yeah,
thank you.
anything that it is edited after the 28th of June falls into the EAA. Yeah.
Cool. Thanks, Vayia. Thanks,
Okay.
Nick.
Sorry, I can't type at the moment. Can I raise a question?
Of course you can.
Can
Please,
we
and anybody else. Yes,
can
please
we
don't feel
clarify
obliged to type.
can we clarify how it impacts on the UK given Brexit?
Absolutely, yes. It is quite easy to actually clarify this because any organization, company that trades in any of the EU member states, and we are talking about a customer relationship, a customer contract. These organizations based in the UK fall under the EAA. Does that clarify
Well,
enough?
it is that's what I assumed, but
Mm-hmm.
there's a further complication because I can imagine an SME who's got more than 10 employers but are not exporting currently won't be compelled to comply unless the UK adopts something that points to it. Is there anything like that happening, or is it just being left totally up to the very vague implications of the Quality Act 2010?
I am not aware of anything happening in the UK at the moment to basically adopt the EAA for the type of organizations that you mentioned, Martin. So yes, the assumption right now, and it is an assumption, and I'm not a legal advisor, but this is the assumption that
Okay.
we are falling back to the more vague Equality Act
Okay, thank you.
principles. Yes.
Just breaking, there's some questions in the chat.
Okay.
I'll try and get from this top. Patrick is saying we mostly sell PDFs, reports, toolkits, website dashboards. Whilst I'm doing what I can myself to make these accessible, does the EAA imply business-to-business deliveries, or should we continue to make the broader business case and defer to employment law to make the case for these? Wait a minute, I'm trying to get what you were saying. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So yes,
Okay.
yes. So the main point is, does the EAA apply to business? So I mean, a UK customer or even a European customer trading with another European customer, business.
Okay, so the EAA is a specific act for customers, so it is specifically for B2C, but I wouldn't be saying that all B2B is excluded because there are so many variations. And even if a little branch of the B2B business actually goes into B2C, because there are some cases where we have the long kind of things going B to B to C, then those will fall under the EAA. And I would say that making broader business cases and deferring to employment law to make the case for this is definitely a very good way to do that. And also speaking to the legal teams in your organization is the way to go from now, just to make sure that the spectrum of products and services is well understood, and to understand what is actually falling under the EAA for the specific individual case. So definitely that's what we see that organizations are doing.
Mm-hmm.
Great, thank you.
Cool, thanks.
That's okay, pleasure.
Cool. Okay, yes, Jenny,
Yeah.
yes, go ahead.
Yeah,
Hi.
sorry, it's easier to ask than type.
Totally.
So I work for a publisher, and we are currently looking at our ancillary materials because we also operate in the US and we need to do stuff under the Americans with Disabilities Act as well. But for the EAA, our sort of legal interpretation of that at the moment is that those ancillaries aren't covered because they're in office file formats published before 28th June 2025. But the ebooks that they support do need to be accessible. And then also the website that those ancillaries are hosted on needs to be accessible, doesn't it? I just wanted to check that everybody's on the same page with that, and I have interpreted that correctly. So the website needs to be accessible, but not necessarily the ancillary materials, but we are working to make that as accessible as possible. Yeah.
Jenny, your kind of explanation does sound right to me, and it is what I'm hearing from other publishers as well. Please, again, as I self-declared, I'm not a legal advisor here, but yeah, anything that is archived, not going to be updated, doesn't fall under the EAA, but services associated, like the website or the ebooks, fall under the EAA if you trade with the EU. Yep.
There isn't a legal case, there's a moral case.
Oh, absolutely. But I think, you know, there is things with backlists as well that it is just such a massive piece of work.
Yeah,
but we are starting it now because, like I say, I mean, I know this is about the EAA, but, you know, many organisations may also have the Americans with Disabilities Act to consider as well, which that the changes to that have an April 2026 deadline.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Cool.
Thanks for adding to that. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Nick, I can see the chat now, so I can pick up some of the questions, but of course you are more than welcome to add your views and your knowledge on that. I can see a message from Laura Carter saying, we want to ensure to get the message across in all of our team on how to follow compliance. Of course, the best way is to talk about the legal requirements as part of EAA. Any other advice on how to get our team excited about the changes? Possibly the benefits that we've mentioned could be a way of getting the team excited. The moral side, of course, as we already said. Yeah, other ways for getting teams excited. Just making sure that the understanding of what this means is common, so there are not deviations, so that we're all speaking the same language and you're looking towards the same kind of destination. I'd say that excites teams. You are also asking, is it the WCAG we have to follow? If it is for web stuff, then yes, the WCAG 2.1 AA currently is directly referenced from the technical standards that are mentioned under the EAA. The European Accessibility Act itself has got Annex 1 that really lists off all the requirements. If you go there, you will see, and especially the examples as well, that you are going to start recognizing the format. We're talking about the 4 principles of accessibility, and you will see that, yes, it really reminds us of the WCAG formatting. So I would say, yeah, WCAG to follow.
Mike's got his hand up. I don't know if you want to.
Yes, please, Mike. It's very nice to see you.
Yeah.
Welcome to the session, please.
Yeah, it was just a minor update that, yes, the current standard reference is WCAG 2.1. The updated one, which will be available in the near future, will be referencing WCAG 2.2. And actually, going back to the previous question about people also needing to meet the US regulations, I mean, throughout the development of the EN 301549 standard, we've tried to be very harmonized with what was going on in the US Section 508 accessibility legislation there, and we sort of work together occasionally with individuals. So the two are not dissimilar.
That's great. Thank you so much, Mike. We have a question from Liam. Do we have some details, please, on the later 2030 deadline for products that existed before June 2025? I think it's Article 32 of the Act. Is this applicable for an e-commerce website that existed before June 2025, but the content still gets updated? The last question is about an e-commerce website exists before June 25, but the content is getting updated. Then this becomes, it needs to follow the EAA from the 28th of June 2025. Anything that gets updated. And an e-commerce website is really under the EAA. He needs to comply with the national laws from the 28th of June 2025. Okay, Christian, I think we've got possibly another 5 minutes, so I will take some other questions that are in order. I have some clarification questions about the EAA. What are the consequences for non-compliance? This really comes down to each member state, countries of the EU to actually specify and put in place. The general picture is that the EAA is asking for cooperation for organizations to actually show that they are doing things to take them to the aim of having accessible products and services. It is in cases of not collaborating that heavier legal actions are going to start coming into play for those organizations. Mike, do you have anything else to add to that about the consequences, perhaps?
Sorry, what's the question?
The question is about consequences for non-compliance.
No, like yourself, I'm not a legal thing. I mean, I believe though with products, I mean, the idea is that for products they will get a CE mark if they comply, and they won't effectively if they do not comply with. So it's a fairly significant negative consequence for not complying. With services, I think it's somewhat more complex. No, I'm not an expert on how that will be applied, but I think it will. I think generally the consequences would not be very favourable, mildly.
Yeah, I mean, there's a good point you raised there, Christian. I mean, particularly you're talking about big companies with the deep pockets who aren't necessarily particularly phased by and makes vague statements about how they'll do better. Basically, I think we have to. It sounds like we have to wait and see, doesn't it? Really. I don't know if different member states will sort of club together to tackle some of the bigger companies. If you mentioned that's Sony and eBay, yes, obviously all the big businesses. That would be good to see. Yeah.
And we have time for one more question. And this is probably, Mike, you'll be the best person to answer this if you wish. The question is, it comes from T. Yaman, something like that. Sorry if I'm not pronouncing this correctly. In my understanding, EN 301459 version 2.21 is a harmonized standard for Directive 2016, which is the Web Accessibility Directive in Europe, and not yet for the EAA. Do you know about the current development status of harmonized standards for EAA?
Yes and no. The actual, unfortunately, the request to develop the standard and update the standard came very, very late, and therefore there will be a standard which should be meant to be harmonised with both legislations, but because it will still be harmonised with the Web Accessibility Directive before the date, the June date, but it's not going to get fully approved by standardised. It's quite a cumbersome process to get it fully agreed by standardised bodies across Europe. Because it's not just an ETSI standard, it's ETSI, CEN and CENELEC. So that will be delayed. What is going to happen about that, I do not know. That's in the Commission's hand to decide what to do. But there will be, I mean, the updating has already, majority of it happened to try and align it with the additional requirements of the EAA. It was already, luckily, a very broad standard anyhow. So, yeah.
That's great. Thank you, Mike. Okay, so I would like to thank Mike and Nick for being with me during this conversation. Thank you very much for joining us. To all of you, thank you for asking questions. I hope you have a great day.
Quick hello, Nick. We used to be colleagues.
Hello, Martin. Hello. Yes. 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 Good to see you.
Thank you
very much, everybody. Bye-bye.
Good to see everybody. Thank you for your participation.